I have a goal right now of personally helping 1,000 people grow their businesses. If you want to help me reach that goal, then take a second and share this episode. Thank you so much. What is up? And welcome back to the Matt Pete Marketing Podcast. And today I'm really stoked. So I have got Mike Kim, and Mike Kim is a brand strategist for business thought leaders, coaches, and authors who want to create impact with their ideas and get their message heard. Mike's refreshing approach has made him a sought-after speaker, online educator, and consultant for top thought leaders. Mike's clients include New York Times best-selling authors and other experts featured on PBS, TED, CNN, and Fox. Mike has been featured on and written in Inc., Entrepreneur, and the Huffington Post. He is the author of the Wall Street best-selling book, You Are the Brand, the 8-Step Blueprint to Showcasing Your Unique Expertise and Building a Highly Profitable, Personally Fulfilling Business. He has spoken at industry-leading events, including Social Media Marketing World, Tribe Conference, and Podcast Movement. He has been a guest on leading podcasts like Smart Passive Income, Entrepreneurs on Fire, and Read to Lead. Mike, I am super stoked to have you on today's show, man.
Man, I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me. I hope to be of value to anyone who's listening today.
Oh, I have no doubt that's going to be the case. And some of the things in your bio stood out to me. So one, Entrepreneurs on Fire and Smart Passive Income. Me and John Lee Dumas are buddies. So like, yeah, we hang out. We hung out actually this year because I'm the videographer. Another thing, I'm a videographer for Podcast Movement, one of the conferences you've spoken at. And so like me and him hung out at Podcast Movement this year. So that ties in both things from your bio there. So I was like, this can't help but be a great show with this many different connections.
Yeah, I saw JLD on, I think it was at Podcast Movement too. We just hung out a bunch. So I was only there for a little while. And so I was just kind of passing through, but we caught up and stuff. So it was good. And I know Jared and those guys. And this world, it's like any other kind of subculture. Good people know more good people who know other good people. And that's just, just how it works. So it doesn't surprise me.
So Mike, your book, You Are the Brand, I've been reading through it. And like you say in the book, it is a blueprint. It is something to come back to. So real quick, before we get into the official interview, I did want to talk about the book just a second because it's so great. Where did you get the idea for You Are the Brand? Just so everybody out there knows.
Yeah, I actually signed my book deal like 5 years ago. Most people don't know that. And I never wrote the book because I was going through some personal stuff and I just had no like creative energy. And it was kind of a different scenario because my publisher isn't a traditional publisher. It's a hybrid publisher. So I actually can do whatever I want. But I did actually make the commitment to write the book like 5 years ago. And then I went through some stuff and a divorce and all that. And so I just had no bandwidth to write the book. And what happened in that interim time was my work got 5 years better. My frameworks and my methods, were 5 years more proven. My network grew, 5 years worth, if you will. And a lot of the content in it just matured. And so I had these frameworks and stuff like way back then. I just never really put them into a book format. And when the pandemic hit and we were all locked down, I was like, look, if I don't write a book this year, I'm really not going to respect the guy I see in the mirror. So that's really where, how the book started. So I can't really say when I started writing the book. It was probably 5-6 years ago. But then I really sat down and did it, during the year in 2019. And so finished it in late 2020, early 2021, and we released it. So I just wanted to put into book format like the best of the best stuff that I teach and write it in a way that would make sense and people could come back to. And so I'm glad you found it useful, and it's been encouraging to hear how people have responded to it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the stuff in here, I know I was singing your praises before we started recording, but I promise I was being genuine. And like, I love the graphic you have for the actual blueprint, the 8 steps. And for everybody listening, it's a drawing of a guy standing at the top of the stairs and the 8 different steps, like point of view, personal stories, platform. It's the different 8 pieces of the blueprint. And I think that graphic is so cool, but then the way you describe it as like a phone number where you can have all of the right digits, but if you don't put them in the right order, you're not going to get to ring into where you need to be. Having this as the blueprint is a huge missing piece of the puzzle where, like you said, you wanted people to read it and feel like, finally, this is what I'm looking for. I
Yeah.
feel like this is going to be a huge piece of that puzzle for everybody trying to build a business out there, which is when I was sitting down writing out my Dream 100 list, I was like, I want this author on my show because this is going to be awesome.
I'm honored. I'm honored.
So, what would you consider your marketing expertise?
I would say that my marketing expertise is in messaging
Okay.
for people who want to share their ideas. It's an interesting thing to market a person. To market a person and their ideas or their message, it's a really unique, thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote the book. Like there are a lot of business books out there, but there's a whole new business out there, and it's called the people business, the personal brand business. So how do you build a business around something that's always evolving and changing, which is a person? If we open a pizza shop, okay, it's a pizza shop, right? Not to denigrate a pizza shop, but you know what it is. It is what it is. It does not really change. The recipe for Pizza Hut or any of these other establishments, McDonald's, they don't really change over time, right? But a person and his or her ideas, they evolve, they change, right? Talk to me 6 months ago and I'll say, yeah, there's some things I don't believe anymore that I did 6 months ago. So when now you're trying to build something as concrete as a business around a person, it's like trying to nail down Jello,
Yeah.
Because I work with people all the time. And I'm like, what do you want to say to the world? And they always are changing their minds. So the way that I wrote the book was to say, hey, this is a framework. It's not a formula. It's a framework. These are definitely principles that you need to build a business around yourself. And you need to approach building a business around yourself with the same resolve and intention that a person would if they were opening a pizza shop. I have friends who have opened pizza shops. They cannot wake up one day and be like, look, I'm going to go on the internet and open a pizza shop. No way. They've got to put a lot of forethought into it. They have to draw up a business plan. They have to make sure that business plan is good enough so that the bank gives them a loan. And they have to find a location, and they have to find the ovens, and they got to get the supplies. And, this is all before they even bake a pizza. And in our world, Matt, you worked with a lot of entrepreneurs in the idea space, and in this world, people think, oh yeah, let me just start a podcast and everything will be fine. I'm like, dude, that is not how it works. It's you got to pay the same price to build a business that you, in the same way you would with a restaurant or whatever. But because the barrier of entry is so low, just start a podcast, just start a YouTube channel. People get deceived and they don't realize you have to do these same things. And so the book is really not necessarily just a marketing and branding book. It's a business book for people building a business around themselves, which is different than opening a pizza shop. So that's where that framework came from. Just this is how I explain it. And these are the step-by-step things that I do with my clients and in my courses. And the people who do it right, they get results.
That's super cool for a couple reasons. And one of them is, I know that if you've been writing this book, like you said, for a while now, and you've stayed true to that messaging, and it rings through because you talk about in like chapter 1 or 2, but early on, about Marie Kondo. Everybody knows who she is. I'm sure she had the, the tidying up your house, whatever doesn't spark joy, that whole thing. And I didn't know her full story. I knew she had like a Netflix special, like a TV show on Netflix, but that was my only introduction to her. I didn't realize that she had been working on that branding of herself for 8 years, I think you said, whenever the show launched. Yeah. So like you said, it's like trying to nail down Jello. Like, she was committed to that branding and that messaging for 8 years and kept driving that home. And like you said, having a podcast is a super low barrier of entry. And that's why I think anybody trying to build a brand of themselves should have a podcast, because it is such a low barrier of entry. It's like, why not have one just to help get yourself started? kind of thing. Like you said, building a pizza shop, like you're not the podcast isn't the building and the ovens and all the secret recipes and all that kind of stuff. It is like, hey, what kind of table and chairs are we having in here? Like it's the
Yeah.
base what you're gonna lay. So being able to build up your brand, put it out there, and like that Marie Kondo method of just sticking by what you're going to put out there for years and years and just keep putting it out there over and over. That's hard. That's the difficult part.
Yeah, it's that consistency. And I do ask people, hey, you seem like you're a brand that's more like Marie Kondo. Are you willing to stick by this for 8 years? And are you willing to like, and that doesn't even mean it'll work.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not even guaranteed it'll work. Like you better really believe what you're trying to say to people. That's one of the main premises in the book. Like we have this term personal branding. It's tossed around everywhere, and you have people who are trying to do it one of two ways, right? They're either painting a false version of themselves, right, or they're oversharing in the name of authenticity, and neither of these work, right? You present a false version of yourselves. This is an extreme example, but they rent a mansion on Airbnb and stage a photo shoot and sort of imply it's their house. And these folks do not realize attention is not owed to you, it's earned. You have to earn every bit of attention. Every personal brand starts from zero. I can't buy Marie Kondo, even if I bought all her intellectual property and all her social media handles. I'm not her. I can't buy her influence. It's hers no matter what.
Yeah.
Well, on the other hand, you have these people who then are like, oh, well, I'm just going to be real. I'm going to be me. And they're like airing out all their dirty laundry. They're oversharing their struggles in the name of authenticity. They're selling their struggles instead of a solution. And these guys are trying to get like attention like you would if you were in a car wreck. Everybody stops and stares, but they don't stay. And that's the premise of the book. You've got to be the brand. You have to be the person you're trying to sell to people. You and I know a lot of the same people, and I've hung out with them when their hair's down and no one's around watching. And I'll be honest. I mean, they are who they are. I didn't trade my corporate job so that I can go into this space and pretend like I'm not myself. Like screw that. It's just too much of a burden to bear. I am who I am wherever I am. And the people have made it, by and large. They start out that way and they grow and they evolve because again, people don't stay the same, but they are who they are.
Yeah. And that is one thing that I find tricky about starting your own brand kind of thing. The brand of you is when to share and what to share. Like you said, you can get way too personal to the point where it's like, this is kind of cringy reading this. Like it's too much, or you can go too far the other direction where nothing is real and everything is just like the highlight of your life where nobody really cares because your life is perfect. So that is something I struggle with because like there are things where like I've recorded episodes for this podcast before that I've never released because I feel like it's too personal. It's like, that needs to stay, in the maybe one day I'll talk about it kind of shelf, but not while it's this fresh,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a good point. If it's still too fresh, I recommend people speak from their scars and not their wounds.
Mm.
I went through a divorce years ago. It's been a long time now. My life went sideways more than almost 6 years ago, and I got divorced well over 3 years ago. But I felt like while people kind of knew what was going on, I couldn't write about it until maybe a year after. So what's funny is like several years ago, I wrote a blog post about it. It's one of the most visited posts I've ever written.
Oh, wow.
But I was trying to help people in the post. I wasn't like this sucks, life, whatever. I was trying to share some of the lessons that I learned. And I think that there are different postures that you can take when you're sharing content. And this is not in the book. Did not make the book because I didn't want the book to be like overwhelming to people. But, you have someone who's a sage, they're way up there. They're like the wise man, the wise woman, and they're preaching to the masses from atop the mountain. you know. And then you have a Sherpa who's a guide, right? Like the Tibetan, in the Himalayas, the mountain guides, right? And they know a path, and they go up the path and down the path, and they just take people up and down the mountain, right? So they're kind of a guide. So they're not a wise man, a wise woman. They're not a guru, but they're a Sherpa. And then you have people who are on the ground, and they're strugglers, right? They're just struggling. And you can posture yourself from one of those three angles. So when it comes to marketing and branding, I think I have a clue of what I'm talking about. So for years, I was a Sherpa. I write this book, and because of the book, it won some accolades and everything. There are definitely some people who think I'm a sage when it comes to personal branding and marketing, and that's fine. But when I wrote that divorce post, I was a struggler. I was like, guys, look, I ain't just like you. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a high achiever. I'm a high performer. And my personal life went sideways, and these are just, I know maybe you're going through the same thing, and you don't have to tell me who you are, but it was a struggle, and it's been a struggle. But here are a few things I've learned along the way. And we form those bonds, like you go to school with somebody, Matt. It's like you're in the military with somebody, you're working with somebody. It's like you're just trying to get through things together, get through life together, get through the fight together, get through the project together. And there's a bond that forms as a result of that. Sometimes it's a lifelong bond. I still have friends from childhood, and so that allows me to be really three-dimensional in the content I'm sharing. Right now, I'm taking kickboxing lessons. Like for the last month and a half, kicks my tail. I don't go on Instagram and act like I'm a sage or even a Sherpa when it comes to kickboxing. I'm like, this thing kicks my tail twice a week. My trainer's crazy. It's awesome. I'm learning more about myself. I'm growing, and I'm a struggler. And while I'm a sage in these other areas, it makes me really well-rounded as a personal brand.
That's so
So
true.
I always tell people, like, share from your scars, not your wounds. And even if things are still hurting, because scars don't mean they're completely healed, try to add value, and it will actually enhance the other things that you share in your life. It's really interesting how that works.
I love that. Share from your scars, not your wounds. That's a good motto whenever you're trying to decide, should I share this right now? It's like, well, is
Mm-hmm.
it a scar or a wound? I love that so much. So, Mike, what's something you see people doing in their marketing that makes you cringe?
I'll say this because it applies to more people. There's two
Okay.
things I would say, but one thing applies to more people than the other. The first thing I would say is that they just copy what other people are saying. I actually have a rule in my coaching programs. So once a year, I launch a program called You Are the Brand. It's based off the content in the book. And literally one of the first rules I lay down for everybody is no quoting dead men. You're not allowed to quote dead people, because folks will hide behind these quotes from Zig Ziglar or Jim Rohn or whoever, and they're great quotes. But you are not exercising the muscle of self-expression if you do that.
Mm,
And
that's
that's
good.
the most important thing to develop early on. You have to learn these fundamentals of expressing your ideas and showcasing your expertise and having a point of view and sharing it. That's the first step in the blueprint. Have a point of view. It's hard to establish your point of view if all you're quoting are dead people or
That's so
even people
true.
who are
Yeah.
alive. Like, okay, I love John Maxwell. He was one of my clients. I worked for them, did some work for them.
Nice.
I love the guy, but you're not him. So stop quoting. He doesn't need your help. He doesn't need your help. He's good. He's good. Trust me. Trust me. He's good. So my rule is no quoting other people. Don't even quote me. I tell that to my students, and no other coaches or experts I know say that to their students. They want their students to elevate them.
Oh,
And I'm like, no,
absolutely.
look,
Yeah.
I want you to grow. And so when people are posting quotes from other people, or they are just like resharing this stuff, there's nothing wrong with that. But the appropriate thing in the beginning is to build the fundamental movements, the fundamental muscle of self-expression. And that's something I see that's, it just drives me crazy. Not because I don't think it's good content. It's just not the right content for when somebody is growing
I think
and
that's amazing.
starting out.
Like you said, I've never heard anybody give that advice before. No quoting dead people. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, there are parts in your own book that I've underlined because I think it's so well thought out. Like the way you present it, like your definition of marketing. Like I was like, that's really good. So I like underline it in the book. It's like, but now I don't want to quote it because
Well, I mean, if you're a marketer or if you're just starting out, like if you're just starting out, it's fine. I get it. But at some point, you're
yeah,
going to need to stop so that you can start saying things in your own way. I quote other people all the time, but I'm 8, 9 years into this thing. People know I have my own opinions. I've established that,
yeah,
so like it's these folks who are just starting out and they don't, they don't have a coach or they don't have anyone to walk with them through it. And I'm like, hey,
yeah.
we can do that later. Just right now, I need to know what you think. And that's kind of how I do. That's how I
Well, and
approach it.
and it makes a lot of sense because if you do, all you do is read other people and quote other people, then yeah, it becomes a sense of hiding behind their words
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, oh, you say something, you get a lot of, oh, that was a really cool quote, that's really good, but it's like, but it was not your original thought. You get this false sense of, you know, satisfaction or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
even though you didn't do any of the work to get the life experience to come up with that quote. So yeah, I love that. Love it.
There was an instance several years ago. I was hosting a business conference and I had a friend named Kevin. I had him speak at the conference. And this was going to be a big deal for him because while he was a corporate consultant, he never had video of himself speaking at an event. So I said, hey, I want you to speak at the event. We've got AV, you're going to get a great looking video,
Yeah.
but you need to nail the talk. I'm literally doing this as a favor for you. You need to nail the talk.
Yeah.
And so I out of all 8 speakers or whatever, I tell them, hey, send me your keynote deck so I can look at it with you. Okay. And he sends it to me and it's just like a few weeks before the event. I'm really tired because I'm stressed out planning the event. And I get it from him. I text him back and I go, hey, I love you, right? Which is code for I'm going to rip you a new one. And it's in love, but I just don't have the filters right now. He's like, yeah. And I said that to him. I was like, hey, man, you're quoting way too many dead people. I want all quotes of anyone who is not you out of this presentation.
Wow.
And I framed it like this. I said, when looking at this keynote deck, I do not get to know you any better. That was the bottom line.
Yeah.
And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, you are telling everyone else's stories. You're telling me Martin Luther King Jr.'s story. Who cares? We already know his story. I want to know your story or why his story impacted you. And so he made these slight changes. He had to do some work. He kills it. I mean, just kills it. Great job. We go to party after the event, right? We go to bar or something like that. And he's talking to the other speakers and he goes, hey, did Mike, do the same thing? I noticed you quoted somebody in your talk. Like Mike didn't tell you that wasn't allowed. And they were all like, what are you talking about? Mike never met with us. And he told him the story. I was the only one who did that with him because he needed to nail it. And he did. And you get to know him. And that's kind of my premise. I look at someone's Instagram feed and their quotes are all from Tony Robbins or John Maxwell or some other guru out there. And I look at this feed and I do not get to know who you are. That's the issue. That's the problem. You see what I mean? And so when I look at someone's Instagram feed or their YouTube channel or whatever they're posting online, their podcasts, I want to get to know this person because if I get to know them, then I have a chance to like them. And if I like them, I'll trust them and I'll continue to try them out and maybe eventually buy something. But if all they are is a parrot of other quotes out there, I don't really get to know them. It's like having a friend. I had these friends in college, right? All they freaking did, dude, was quote movie lines. And I'm just like, who are you? Like, who are you? Right. Or they
Yeah.
quote, like, they're super religious and all they do is quote chapter and verse, which I'm fine if that's what you believe. But who are you?
Yeah.
Don't just tell me things that someone else said. Like, why do they apply to you? So that's kind of how I look at it. It's a long, drawn out answer, but I hope those illustrations make sense and help.
Oh, absolutely. It does not. It's going to change the way that I think about how I present things because that's not something I've ever thought about before, but it's a really good point.
Mm.
So, like you said, it applies to a lot of people. I think that's going to help a lot of people who are crafting their story out there. So, Mike, if you were to start marketing for a new business today and they said, hey, we've only got $1,000 in our budget for you to use, how would you use that to get some more clients?
Well, it would depend on depend on the type of business.
Your ideal client, whoever that would be.
Okay, yeah. So if it was somebody who was an expert in some way, shape, or form, they were subject matter expert,
Mhm.
and they were trying to get their ideas out into the space, right? They were trying to become a coach, a speaker, a content creator. Like, let's say that they're a financial planner and they've
Okay.
got a good business, right? But they want to become a personal brand. Like, I like working those people. I like people who have subject matter expertise, so they actually know what they're talking about, and we now need to make them the face of their brand, right? Their content. So if I had $1,000, the first thing I would do is I would extract their answers to the questions in chapter 3 of the book, step 1 of
Okay.
the framework, the personal brand 3. What pisses you off? What breaks your heart? What's the big problem you're trying to solve? Right? I would extract that out and write that. I wouldn't even buy a website, just have the story there, right? Then the second thing I would do is I would put their expertise along with the answers to that question into a PDF, and I would make a lead magnet out of it, put it online, right?
Mhm.
And run Facebook ads, cold traffic, until I got 100 subscribers. That's the
Okay.
benchmark. Because now I can see if it's converting or not. And that's just a couple $100. You don't need to spend that much money, but pay somebody to do that, and then take the money from the ads and run those ads. Now you have an email list. If you have 100 subscribers with an email list, you just write the list. So I'm very much not a social media like forward person if
Okay.
it's the kind of client that I work with. Now, if you want to be an influencer, it's a little bit of a different story, right? It's a little bit of a different story. You might need to invest in a photographer for Instagram, or YouTube with cameras or whatever. One of the clients in my programs right now, and this is why it's different for everybody. She joined the program because she wants to teach quilting, like literally sewing a quilt,
Yeah.
to military veterans. She's a military vet. And she said, well, somebody found out I was doing this and recommended I hire a coach. And I said, how much is the coach? And she gave me the number. I was like, I can tell you exactly what to do with this money, and none of the money will come to me because you don't need a coach right now. She needs to invest in YouTube. How are you going to teach quilting on a podcast? You can't do it. So podcast is not right for her.
Yeah.
You can't demonstrate it. So I was like, you need to invest in a camera, a microphone. You need to invest in a video editor. You need to invest in a graphic designer who can make you a few templates for the YouTube thumbnails.
Yep.
Buy a copywriting guide for YouTube so that you can headline your videos the proper way. And then invest in all of this with the same money you would pay this coach, and you'll be way ahead in 6 months. So everyone's circumstance is different. Everyone's situation is different. Even this financial planner, they may actually not be good on video. They might not be good at communicating on a podcast. So I've got to take all that into account. But one thing I do know is that they need an email list. So it's all sort of relative, but that's sort of how I look at it. And I tell the folks I work with, I will tell you exactly how to spend $1,000 if you will ask me. And it won't even be for me. It's not even for my benefit. I just don't want you to waste money. So it is really different for everybody. And we all make some spending mistakes here and there. But by and large, especially with starting out, I generally know what a person has to do if I get to know them a little bit.
Like you said, they might not be good on video or on podcast or whatever, but they need a list. What it comes down to right there. Like you said, you've been doing this for a good many years now. So do you have a story of a time where you really messed up something you're doing with marketing?
I have a business mess up. This was really bad. I believe it was 2018. I held an event and we totally screwed up the finances and the budgeting for the event. So, I will never host an event at a hotel again.
Oh, no.
So, I held this event in Austin, Texas, and my assistant and I, we completely misunderstood the contract. So we got the event space, but no one at the event wanted to stay at the hotel because it was an expensive venue. So they all stayed at Airbnbs or other hotels and just came for the conference. Well, I was on the hook now for all these unbooked rooms. This was like $35,000. And I was like, well, that's kind of sucky because I can't cancel the event because everyone paid to come. And I don't have enough money to refund everybody because this was a high ticket event. And I don't have the money to pay for the hotel right now because I didn't have my finances in order. And so I hustled. I remember Easter weekend, I just hustled like crazy. I made the money in a weekend because I had an email list. An email list saved my tail. All I did was mail and offer a few coaching spots and a mastermind and blah, blah, blah. And I had the money like in a weekend, no exaggeration. And I was so tired after that, like I could not really enjoy the event, for obvious reasons. I was like, man, I was having a hard time being really, really present. But man, in all seriousness, after that, I was like, I will never allow this to happen to me again. I am a gunslinger when it comes to business. I'm like, we're good. I can always go out and make money. And the thing with gunslingers are they don't look at anything else. They just like, hey, we caught a bunch of things. We're fine. Like, oh, I made money. It's fine, right? But I don't take the time to look at the systems or the expenses or the budgets. It's not my forte. So I hired a firm to help me with this and get me out of this kind of crazy financial mess I'd made in my business. Plus, I was going through a divorce at that time. So everything was, I had no bandwidth to look at numbers and budget things. So I made more money and then I paid them to fix everything. And all these years later, man, I've never worried about taxes. I've never worried about the budget. It's like the business is doing really, really well. Pandemic year was the best year I ever had. And then this past year was even better than that.
Nice.
And it's like I learned a lot from that situation because like we started with, at the end of the day, I'm a pizza shop owner. I gotta watch my numbers. I gotta put on, my grown-up pants and be like, if you're gonna really be an entrepreneur and stay in this for the long game, because the honeymoon period is over for me. The honeymoon period of, I have, people will listen to a podcast if I publish it and blah, all that is past.
Yeah.
I've got to think about this as a business and I've got to treat it like a business because business requires that kind of attention. So that was a huge mistake. It did affect me for a little while because I didn't want to do events for a while after that. But, we were planning on a conference next April. It'll be the biggest one I ever do, because all the book launches and stuff like that, that went on. So we want to do a big conference just once, to kind of capstone everything. And I know exactly how to do it because I learned these lessons, these hard lessons. I know what to do and what not to do. Right. So, yeah, man, I'm grateful for the lessons. It was not fun to go through, but very invaluable.
Yeah. I love how you're on the hook for $35,000 and you're like, that's kind of sucky. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I do have a question from that because
Hmm.
just general curiosity, you're on the hook for $35,000. You say you went out on a weekend, emailing your list, creating offers, selling stuff. How big do you know how big your list was at that time to
Only a couple
generate that much?
thousand.
Really?
Yeah.
And you were able
Yeah.
to
Only a
generate
couple thousand.
$35,000 in a weekend.
Yep. Hmm. It was a mix
That's
between
amazing.
some product sales, coaching programs, product sales, masterminds, and then contacting old clients and just asking, do you need any writing done? Because I had a skill, I could write copy for them.
Yeah.
So one guy was like, yeah, I need something done with 5K work. And he was like, yeah, cool. And he was the kind of client who just paid everything up front. He was just boom, really easy. Right. So that helped chip away at it. And so, email, like I wrote about this to in one of my newsletters years ago. And it just goes to show, man, it's like, if I didn't have my email list, like I would have been in a lot of trouble. Now I could have called in favors. I could have called in friends,
Yeah.
but that it just showed me like you can take all of my podcast listeners, all of my social media accounts combined, and it wouldn't be the size of my list because I've just put the priority on that so much over the years because that's the only thing I can sell. If I wanted to sell my business and be out of this game, other than my book, which is going to be out there forever, I have nothing else to sell. No one's going to buy MikeKim.com from me. They're not going to do it. It's not intrinsically valuable,
Yeah.
right? It's my list. My list is the database of my business. So I prioritize that. But even back then, my list was not as big as, my social media accounts were not very large. I had a podcast and everything like that, but the money's in the list.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool to know that 2,000 person list and like, you can hustle your way through it.
Yep.
So, what's your favorite marketing tool?
Do you mean like an app or anything?
Anything. It can be an app, it can be a software, whatever it is. What helps you market?
Copywriting guides.
Okay.
There are not a lot of apps around that I know of. But I will say the most important skill that I have developed that has contributed to my success is copywriting. It's
Good
just
to know.
writing, better, writing according to the web. I was always a strong writer, but I didn't know copywriting. And when I discovered it, I really studied it. And that doesn't mean everybody has to be a great copywriter, but you need to recognize great copy. So if you're a YouTuber or a podcaster, you're not really a writer, you veer more towards, those mediums, you still need to know good headlines, how to write great headlines, because otherwise no one will listen to your episode. No one will watch your video. So that's been hands down the most important skill. And I had never really taught it. I just like there are formulas and stuff like that. I've never really taught it to people. I know I could if if I really wanted to, but for the last several years, the attention has really been on you are the brand and the personal brand aspect of my business. But I will say, like, when I'm in the thick of it, you do not realize how much writing you have to do for marketing.
If you could go back to when you first started your marketing journey, I know you talk about it in your book, and go back to when you first started. Give yourself one piece of advice. What's it going to be?
Start ads earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, do paid traffic earlier. Now, back then it was easier than it is now, right?
True.
But
True.
I would just say, start paid traffic earlier. That would have grown my
Okay.
list a lot quicker. Because organic list growth, while the quality is much better, if you have good content and you stick out in the market, then just get it to the market. Now I think my advice would have changed if I were to start today. I actually recommend to a lot of people who have certain expertise and they don't really have a list or they don't really have brand recognition to do a summit. I tell people to do a virtual summit. You'll hit
Okay.
like 5 birds with one stone. You'll grow your list, you'll create content, you'll monetize, you'll get brand recognition. And so it's a lot of work, but I tell people to do it, and so um it's Matt, it's all relative. It's just like the work you do with video. It's like it's all relative. It depends on the situation, but that's how you're working with an expert. I've worked with videographers in the past and like, well, yeah, if you do this and like, okay, thank you for your expertise. Like, I know you're a pro. I know you know what you're doing. And it's the same way with me. I just have been in this space so long and worked with every shape and form of person. And I'm just like, okay, you're really good at this, and this. These other things are lacking. So let's just play your strengths. But yeah, there are a few folks that I've told it's a lot of work, but if you do a virtual summit, you'll make money, you'll grow an email list. I know you don't know what those things mean yet, but they're absolutely vital. And that's what I work towards.
That's pretty cool. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I'm going to give that some
Yeah.
thought.
Yes.
All right, Mike. So aside from everybody going out right now and buying your book, You Are the Brand, how would you like for people to learn more about you and stay connected?
I would say just listen to the podcast. You're listening to this podcast. The show is also called You Are the Brand. I recently rebranded it a couple episodes ago. And just start with episode 301. That's when I started rebranding it to You Are the Brand. You'll be able to kind of track along with the show from sort of the beginning, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you connect with me on Instagram at Mike Kim TV, there's a link in my bio where you can grab the audiobook for You Are the Brand absolutely free, because Amazon still hasn't released it for like 4 months. It's driving me nuts. So I just decided to give it away to everybody. So if you just go to my Instagram, go to mikekim.com/YATB audio, You Are the Brand audio. That link is on my Instagram and you can go grab it for free.
That is super amazing, dude. I didn't even know that was coming. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go grab that because I've been reading it. Like I said, I've been taking notes in here and underlining things, but at heart, I'm an audiobook kind of guy. Like that's how I consume most of my stuff. But that's super cool that you're just giving it away. Like getting the message out there. That is awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
My pleasure, Matt. It's good to see you. Good to catch up.
Awesome. And for everybody out there listening and watching along, I hope this interview has been super eye-opening for you. I really do hope that you go out and get this book, You Are the Brand. You can get for the audiobook for free by going and following Mike on Instagram, clicking the link in his bio to grab that. Remember that marketing really matters. If you know someone who has a business that could use some help marketing their business, take a second and share this podcast with them. Thank you so much and have an awesome day.